Welcome everybody, my name is Jeff St Laurent and this is the Tuesday live show, and today's topic is, should I run Facebook ads? So we're going to talk about the ad topic and give you some insight, not whether you necessarily should run them or not. I'm not going to say you should or you shouldn't. I'll give you some recommendations so you can create your own decision and go from there. Having run Facebook ads over several years with several different campaigns, I have some expertise in this area, and I want to shed some light on that use so you can make a great decision whether it's for you or not. With that being said, I'll start it off and say I do record all of my Tuesday live shows, and I put them in my university at sellingcoaching.com. So check out the university. I help coaches transition to a full-time business. So I have a lot of great resources on my website, one of which, if you want to start off on the homepage, if you enter your name and email address, that's going to give you my audio resource called Launching Your Coaching Business, the First 3 Vital Steps. I've got a lot of great stuff over there. Like I said, it's Selling Coaching. Also, if you're in the midst of launching your business, starting off, wherever you're at in the beginning phases, if you're challenged with some items and you know you need some help, I am available for some one-on-one mentor coaching. If that's of interest to you, visit my website, sellingcoaching.com, and fill out the form at the bottom of the Work With Me page. With that being said, let's start to address Facebook ads. And if you're on Facebook and you are on your news feed scrolling through, for whatever reason, it's not too long before you see sponsored ads. And since you're most likely a coach, if you're watching this, well, you probably are a coach. But if you're a coach watching this and you're scrolling on your Facebook news feed, then I would imagine, I would bet a lot that you would be getting a lot of different ads targeting you as a coach and your business, with all these guys and all these girls sharing all different viewpoints on how you can launch your business. Whenever you create a post on Facebook, it's always going to ask you, do you want to boost this post, right? Which is basically it's an ad. It's a Facebook ad, right? It's supposed to be a simple way to do it. And it's also very tempting. And they're going to say, hey, listen, if you just spend $5, $3, $2, $10, right? Short money. It's going to increase your reach. If you spend this much, it's going to, over the next day or two, it's going to, put this in front of 1,000 people or 1,500 people. So it's very easy to be tempted, or at least to think of like, wow, maybe I should be doing this. Not only because you see it all the time, being recommended to you. You think, wow, I want to get more exposure, and it's just a little bit of money. And then you see all these people doing ads all the time, right? So I've done Facebook ads. I've been mentor coaching for the last 7 years, and I've done Facebook ads at 3 different points over those 7 years. Probably one for a span of like 6 months, one for a span of like 7 months, and one for a span of a year, intermittently. And the reason I started doing them was twofold. Not necessarily in any order, but probably if I had to order them for the sake of actually committing to something. One would be because I wanted to grow my business and get more exposure, and I wanted to see how they worked, how I could leverage them. And the other big reason was because I'm a mentor coach, and I know a lot of coaches are going to want to do Facebook ads or any other type of paid advertising. I'm just focusing on Facebook ads today. That's what I have experience with. I have other clients that have used Google ads, things like that, SEO optimization, stuff like that. And this can apply definitely to some of those other forms of advertising. But the other aspect of, like I said, why I wanted to do that is because as a mentor coach, I knew a lot of my clients would be asking me that question, and I wanted to have some experience in doing it myself. And I will say, with the experiences of doing it myself, if I'm going to summarize what I'm going to say today and then maybe break it down, would be summarization is in my experience for myself, I had a positive gain in terms of if I'm just talking money, a financial gain by doing Facebook ads, meaning the amount of, let's just talk money here, the amount of money I invested in the ads, and then the amount of money that I made in return that the best I could directly associate to those ads, the actual cost of the ad, and paying anyone to help me get the ad out there. In terms of, I hired people to help me create my Facebook ads, the experts. Whatever money I spent in that process, I made more money in return. So that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. And what I'll say now is the challenge I have with it in terms of recommending it for different coaches starting off, and I'll explain this a little bit, right? I'm a little hesitant in recommending it for newer coaches, and I'll explain why. And if the reason that I give why towards my hesitancy doesn't apply to you, then it's something you could definitely consider. But what I found is I was able to monetize more than what I spent. Great. When I looked at it and I realized how I was able to do that, I was able to do that because, if I can say this myself, I feel strong in the selling skill set. I felt strong in my ways of monetizing in terms of my follow-up, my interaction with the people, the leads that came in, the if you will, the funnel I have in place in terms of how I stay in front of my audience, how I dig and I follow up with those people and I create conversations, and I feel strong in that area. If I wasn't as strong in that area, rewind decade plus, well, a lot longer than that, probably 15 plus years or so, when I was starting off as a coach, I can absolutely unequivocally say that if I ran the same ads and I got the same results in terms of the leads coming in, I would not have monetized it as well as I did now. And I will say unequivocally, because I was not as nearly as, I didn't understand what I understand now, right? This is what I'm teaching now. I didn't understand it back then. And I'm teaching it now because I understood it and I saw what it created in my business. And I realized, wow, I don't see how coaches are going to make it without, if you will, the selling skill set. I'm not saying you can't. I'm saying I just didn't know how. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So with that brings up my hesitancy, because I also interact with a lot of coaches starting off. I mentor coach in groups and one-on-one, a lot of coaches that are starting off. And one of the main reasons why most people come to me is because they need specific guidance. They need to be told what to do. They need the structures, and they're not feeling confident in the selling process. Even some of the people that come to me who have a sales background, who are confident in the selling process, when they come to start selling as a coach, they're like, wow, this is really different than maybe what I've sold before, because you're selling yourself. It's a brand, right? It's very different. You know, there's a fundamental thread through any selling that there's crossover in any industry, but then you get into specific industries and selling can become very different outside of the fundamental pieces. And so because I understand where the average coach is starting off with the selling skill set and really also a lack of understanding of their audience, and if that applies to you, then I would not recommend you do Facebook ads right out of the gates. What I recommend doing, if that's the case, is getting out there in a very manual way, which is, to me, a fundamental way. It's a great way. So don't think it's a bad way. It could feel like it's more work and it's slower, but I wouldn't judge it as more work and slower. When I look at that, I just go like, well, that's the pace. That's how it's supposed to be. Like, that's how it is. Right? So it's not slower. It might be slower and harder than you'd like or you'd think or would expect. But having done this full time for 17 years, I recognize and I look at that and go like, well, that's just the process. That's just what it is. And any wins that happen on a quicker, basis, that's just a win. That's just, yes, it happens. Like it's a last minute shot. I mean, it probably shouldn't go in because it's a crazy shot, but it goes in and they win the game, right? It happens. It can happen, right? So with that being said, take that into consideration. And that's where I have trouble recommending, or I wouldn't recommend, if you're newer to coaching, if you don't feel at all comfortable around the selling skill set. Even if you feel fairly comfortable, I'd still caution it. I would also, if you're not quite sure what your message is, if you're not quite sure who you're helping, if you're not dialed in with a real challenge people are facing, you can't identify them very well or very clearly or very specifically. Not only if you can't identify them well or specifically, but if you can't identify the outcome or the specific outcome as well, then I also wouldn't recommend that right out of the gates. And the reason being is because the whole point of an ad is no different than a post. It's the same thing. The only difference is the person who's paying Facebook for the ad is they're saying, I want you to take this information, whatever is in this post, and I'm going to pay you to specifically put it in front of these people who have these particular interests, who live maybe in a certain demographic, who maybe are a certain age, who have certain interests, who have joined different groups and or have liked certain pages, so it's very dialed in. That's the point of paying for an ad, is you're saying, do this with this information. And it's also not only that, but it's also that person who's paying Facebook, they also have a strong understanding of not only where that person is, what their interests are, and who they are, but I also have a really good idea of what it is that their pain points are, what it is that they need that I can help them with, and also what is the language with which I'm going to express it that I know, or at least I'm fairly certain or have good confidence that they will actually, see it, consume it, and take an action on, right? And go, yes, I want to click, I want to enroll, I want to take action. So those are a lot of pieces. So if you can't identify those pieces very well, that's where I would not recommend you doing ads at this point. At some point, hopefully you would start to understand that more. At that point, then I would recommend considering it. But prior to that, I wouldn't recommend considering it, because now that's like boosting an ad. You boost an ad, you pay $10, $20, whatever it is, short money, and you do a little, I could put it in front of this person. But the average coach starting off, at least most of the people I talk to, they're very general. So you're putting something in front of a bunch of people that it's a lot more watered down. Could you get a result? Yes, but then we also have to answer that other question. And if you can't answer this next question, I also wouldn't recommend doing them. What is the result you're looking for, right? What are we trying to do? So it's not only now finding the right person with the right interests, expressing the right communication so that they take an action, but what is the action we want them to take? And then once they take that action, typically it's clicking, right? So what are they clicking to? And why are they clicking there? And once they're there, what do we want them to do? And let's just say we want them to opt in. We want them to enter the name and email address for some reason. Maybe you're doing a small upsell. Maybe you're selling a low cost $27, ebook, resource, etc. Maybe it's a resource, a free something. It's a free webinar. It's a free resource. Any variation of that, right? Whether it's they sign up for that will happen, or that's happening in the next, it's a replay. It's an evergreen webinar that just replays, or maybe you're doing it live, on a Wednesday night, and you're running ads to fill the seats for that. Whatever version of it is, right? They're opting into something. You've got to really understand, well, what process am I taking them through, right? So in other words, how am I going to monetize that? So now I've got the person's name and email, and they've opted in for whatever it is. Any of those things or something else that I've expressed. Great. So now what's my plan on taking them through a process? People call that a funnel. All right. What's the funnel I'm taking them through where I'm going to monetize that? And if you don't have any idea of what that would look like, or what path you'd take them on, or how you're going to monetize it, I would also consider waiting on that. Now, that's something obviously you can figure out, right? So if you're not quite sure, that's something, if you have all the stuff prior to that I talked about, then okay, well, if you can learn that other stuff, you can figure that stuff out. That's why I'd recommend, even if you're going to, if any of the stuff I said, whether you ignore it all and you're like, I don't care, I still want to try it, great, try it. I'm not saying don't. I'm just giving you some advice, to consider or not. But even if you all those other things, well, I know my message. I know who I want to get in front of. I know what I want to get them to do. I know, you know that stuff. Even if all that is true, then I would still recommend finding someone to hire to help you create either the Facebook ad itself, or if the latter comes in where, you're not quite sure the funnel, the process you want to take them through, in terms of, I know my audience really well. I know who they are, what they want, their challenges, the language I want to use to get them. I have an idea of kind of the process I want to take them through. You can hire someone. I even help some of my clients with the funnel process, like what's the funnel process from there. But I would always recommend you hiring someone. This is something that not in my expertise. Actually creating the ad. And the reason I recommend that is now there's an ad spend. It's what you spend to Facebook to put the ad out there, but now there's also an additional cost of having someone, actually help you create the ad, put it into the back end of Facebook, optimize it, and do all the stuff that they do, creating lookalike audiences. I've learned enough, but I still probably couldn't or wouldn't do it myself, because my philosophy is listen, if I'm going to do something that I'm clearly not the expert in, and someone has spent time, energy, and has experience, and especially that I'm going to spend money on, and I could spend $10 a day on something and never really be sure or certain that I'm doing it right. And I'm just hoping. And even if I would take so long to do it, whereas I'm like, listen, I'd spend X amount of dollars to have someone and trust that, whatever they're doing it right. So whatever money I'm spending on my ad, it's optimized the right way. And that's obviously a level of trust, but that would be my recommendation, because I don't want to be out there guessing. If my ad's not working, I want to know, well, it's not because it's not optimized, or I missed a setting, or I'm doing something wrong, or, I spent hundreds or thousands of dollars, later on and realized, oh, I should have been doing that. I didn't have a pixel set up, or to build an audience. And therefore, not only did I spend 3 months and thousands of dollars, but now I don't have anything. So there's some things that if you are going to do it, I would recommend finding someone who has an expertise in that area, in order to actually, help you with that, so you can feel confident in what you're doing. And that's where I say, if you are in a position, like why I would recommend doing something like that is obviously the opposite of what I said, right? You're confident in your sales skills, you're confident in your message and who that message is for, you're confident in the outcome. You're confident in your ability to create conversations as leads, if you will, come in, and you have a strong plan, or at least a strong plan, or feel like you can develop a strong plan on the process you want to take a lead through. Someone who clicks, enters a name and email, let's say, as an example, and you have a strong plan, or you can come up with a strong plan to take them through and how you can monetize that. That's when it's something that I definitely would consider. The other last thing I'll add in before we close this out is I would also recommend that you be earning some money prior to doing this. So that's why typically if you're starting off and you're not earning any money from your coaching business, it doesn't necessarily matter what your financial situation is. Let's say you're doing well outside of that. You've got support, you've got money saved, whatever, who cares? You want to run on your credit card and you're willing to spend the money for all that stuff. I'm not saying don't. I'm saying I would recommend doing the manual piece of the business, getting your message out there, creating conversations, getting on the phone, emailing people. This is what I teach people. This is what I teach my clients, because I want you to understand that process. I want you to start to have conversations. I'd rather have you invest time and lose some time, but you're not losing time. That's a poor choice of words on my part, because in that time you're learning. So you're learning the valuable pieces that if ever at some point you want to do an ad, all that valuable education from those conversations, etc., are going to come into play, which is going to help you be better and more effective at running the ad. And that's why especially if you're not earning any money, it puts a lot more pressure on the ad to have to perform, when really it's not so much the ad that has to perform. Yes, it does. However, what I found is I could be getting a bunch of leads coming in, but if I don't know how to, have conversations and follow up with those people through the process that I've designed, then it doesn't matter how many names and emails you get. You can get hundreds a day. It doesn't matter if I don't know how to create those conversations from that. And that's why I'd say, though, and especially if you haven't earned anything yet, or you're spending money that you don't have, or that you've got saved, from another source, it's going to be a lot more tense. Especially if you're not monetizing it right away or monetizing it consistently. And it does take some time to build audiences and take them through a process, start to warm them up to you, to get them to know you and like you and trust you. It's not like people just click on something and buy something and hire you. It can happen, and it does. However, it's not the norm, and it's not as frequent. there's just like anything, there's a relationship needs to be built, some trust and rapport, etc. And that doesn't happen necessarily right out of the gates, for the majority of people. So we need to understand that. And that's why, at least if you've gone through the process and you're earning some money in your business, it doesn't have to be a lot either, right? You're earning $1,000 a month or whatever. Now you could take a portion of that. You're going to say, I'm going to take 30%. Let's assume you've taken out money for taxes and all the other, other expenses, but whatever your net profit is, maybe take 30% of your net profit and say, maybe I want to start doing a little campaign and start running that. Do it consistently, because you need consistency over time. You need to have some type of an ad spend, right? You need at least, let's say, $10 a day. Call it about $300 a month, right? And so that's just to start trickling and getting out there. And you need to start ramping up probably soon after that, once you start getting some traction, for it to actually start to make sense. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. So as I'm talking about this stuff, if you're overwhelmed and if you're like, oh, geez, there's so much, like, I would stay away from it right now and start working on, I would say most people listening to this would be, hey, listen, I'm starting off, and therefore there's a bunch of other stuff I should figure out first. I wanted to bring this topic up today because, people ask about it. I felt it was something that you shed some light on that would allow you to at least, hopefully, decide in either direction. Maybe you're listening to this, you're like, yep, definitely no for right now. Great. Now you can focus on what you deserve to focus on. Or if you're like, wow, you know what? It's something I definitely want to look into further. Let me do a little bit more research. Let me find some people. Let's create a conversation, go from there.